America's involvement in the Middle East is rooted in oil, alliances, and conflict. For decades, the U.S. has prioritized the region's stability to protect global energy supplies. The U.S. has built strong ties with Israel, providing military and financial aid to ensure its security. At the same time, Washington has maintained crucial relationships with Arab states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, balancing competing interests. This diplomatic juggling act has shaped American policy for generations. U.S. military actions from the Gulf War to the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq have left lasting impacts. These interventions aimed to protect American interests but often led to unintended consequences. Tensions with Iran have simmered since the 1979 Islamic Revolution, especially over Iran's nuclear ambitions. Years of sanctions, covert operations, and standoffs have kept the region on edge. The adversarial relationship between the U.S. and Iran set the stage for the direct military clash of 2025. The long history of American intervention explains the difficult choices made in this latest conflict. The region's volatility is a product of decades of entangled interests and unresolved rivalries. Each new crisis is shaped by the legacy of past interventions. The 2025 war is just the latest chapter in a story that continues to shape the world. Understanding this history is key to grasping why the stakes remain so high. The choices made today are built on the foundations of yesterday's actions. The Middle East remains a region where history never truly ends. The 2025 war was years in the making, fueled by a shadow war between Israel and Iran. Israel used covert operations to slow Iran's nuclear progress, while Iran built a network of proxy forces like Hezbollah. This ring of fire strategy allowed Iran to threaten Israel from multiple fronts without direct confrontation. The core issue was Iran's nuclear program. The 2015 nuclear deal briefly eased tensions, but the U.S. withdrawal in 2018 reignited the crisis. Iran resumed nuclear activities, moving closer to weapons capability. Israel saw this as an existential threat and repeatedly warned it would not tolerate a nuclear Iran. Diplomatic options faded as both sides hardened their positions. By 2025, international inspectors had limited access, and Iran's uranium enrichment neared weapons grade. The world watched anxiously as the red lines drew closer. The stage was set for confrontation, with both nations convinced that time was running out. The seeds of war were sown in mistrust, failed diplomacy, and the relentless march of technology. The countdown to conflict had begun. The war erupted with a bold Israeli airstrike on Iran's nuclear facilities on April 15, 2025. Key sites like Natanz and Fordow were targeted in a large-scale operation. The world was stunned as the shadow war became an open conflict. The U.S., while not part of the initial strike, provided critical support, air cover, intelligence, and military readiness. This signaled unwavering American backing for Israel. Iran retaliated within 48 hours, launching hundreds of missiles and drones at Israeli targets. Israel's air defenses intercepted many, but some caused significant damage and casualties. Iran's proxies, including Hezbollah, opened a second front from Lebanon, stretching Israel's military. The fighting escalated rapidly, raising fears of a wider regional war. For 2 weeks, intense exchanges rocked the region. Israel struck back at Iranian missile sites and command centers. U.S. forces in Iraq and Syria were attacked by Iranian-backed militias, prompting American airstrikes in response. International pressure mounted as the risk of escalation grew. Secret negotiations led to a ceasefire on May 1, 2025. The fighting stopped, but the region was left deeply unstable. The war's timeline was short but devastating. It exposed the fragility of peace and the speed at which conflict can spiral. The world was left to reckon with the aftermath. The shadow of war lingered over the Middle East. The cost of confrontation was only beginning to be understood. The ceasefire revealed the true costs of the war. Israel's strikes set back Iran's nuclear program by years but did not destroy it. Iran vowed to rebuild, now with even less international oversight. Both sides suffered casualties, military and civilian. The psychological toll was immense, with millions living in fear. Arab states remained publicly silent but privately relieved at Iran's setback. The conflict deepened unofficial alliances between Israel and Gulf states. In countries with Iranian influence, tensions soared and hardliners gained ground. Iran's government used the attack to rally support and suppress dissent. Israel's government saw a surge in popularity, but the sense of security was fragile. The war's ripple effects destabilized the region further. The ceasefire was uneasy, with underlying issues unresolved. The legacy of fear and uncertainty persisted. The Middle East braced for what might come next. The cost of war was measured not just in destruction, but in the deepening of old wounds. The U.S. supported Israel for several reasons. The alliance with Israel is a cornerstone of American foreign policy. Containing Iran's influence and nuclear ambitions was seen as vital to regional stability. Protecting global energy routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz, was another key concern. A wider war could have crippled the world economy. U.S. intervention aimed to prevent escalation while supporting its ally. Domestic politics also played a role. Support for Israel is strong among American voters and in Congress. Strategic interests, economic security, and political realities all drove the decision. The U.S. sought to balance support for Israel with the need to avoid a catastrophic regional war. The intervention was a calculated risk in a high-stakes environment. The consequences would shape the region for years to come. The war sparked global debate over its legality and morality. Critics called Israel's strike a violation of international law, arguing there was no imminent threat. Israel claimed preemptive self-defense, citing the existential danger of a nuclear Iran. The U.S. faced criticism for supporting what many saw as an illegal war. The international community was deeply divided. The risk of a wider conflict was ever present, with fears of escalation across the region. The war also strengthened hardliners in Iran and sidelined the Palestinian issue. The conflict exposed the limits of international law in the face of national security fears. Moral questions about civilian suffering and regional stability went largely unanswered. The war's legacy was one of deepened divisions and unresolved grievances. The world was left to question whether the ends justified the means. The rules of war were tested and found wanting. The debate continues with no easy answers. The 2025 war reshaped the Middle East's strategic landscape. Iran abandoned nuclear agreements, likely pursuing its ambitions in secret. Regional alliances shifted, with Israel and Sunni Arab states forming a stronger bloc against Iran. The old Arab-Israeli conflict gave way to a new axis of rivalry. Oil prices spiked, fueling global economic anxiety. The war exposed the world's dependence on a volatile region. Iran was weakened militarily but became more unpredictable. Israel proved its military resolve but faces a vengeful adversary. The U.S. deepened its role as security guarantor, but at a cost. The new Middle East is more polarized and dangerous. The risk of another larger war remains high. The ceasefire is only a pause, not a peace. The risk of renewed conflict remains high as Iran rebuilds and Israel stays vigilant. Diplomacy is now more urgent than ever. New channels of communication are needed to prevent accidental escalation. Neutral countries may play a key role in mediating future crises. The U.S. must help manage the fragile ceasefire and encourage restraint among allies. Building a stable regional security framework is essential. Military action alone cannot solve the region's deep-rooted problems. The war showed the limits of force and the need for political solutions. Lasting peace requires addressing mistrust, the Palestinian issue, and internal pressures. The road to stability is long and uncertain. After the brink of major war, diplomacy is the only real hope. The future depends on wise leadership and a willingness to break the cycle of violence.